I stood at my kitchen window, watching a woman I'd never met carry boxes into my house. Her name was Iris Maslow, and she was moving into the guest bedroom. My husband Devlin had introduced her 3 days earlier as a friend who needed temporary housing. But I knew the truth. I'd known for 6 months that my husband was having an affair. What I didn't expect was that he'd bring his lover into our home. I'm Lorraine Caldwell, 62 years old, and I've spent 40 years building a life with a man who suddenly decided I was invisible. My hands trembled as I held my coffee mug. Every instinct screamed at me to throw them both out, to cause a scene, to fight. But I did something else instead. I smiled, said nothing, and quietly started making phone calls that would change everything. The affair started last spring when Devlin joined a fitness program. He claimed he needed to get healthier, lose weight, take care of himself. I supported him completely. I even bought him new workout clothes and prepared special meals. What I didn't know was that his wellness coach was a 32-year-old woman named Iris. I discovered the truth by accident. Devlin left his phone unlocked one morning while showering. A text message appeared on the screen that made my blood run cold. Iris had written words no coach should write to a married client. I sat on our bed, reading months of messages. My husband of 40 years had fallen in love with someone else. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. But I didn't confront him that day. Something inside me said to wait, to watch, to understand the full picture before acting. For 6 months, I played the role of the oblivious wife. I smiled when Devlin came home late. I accepted his excuses about working overtime or meeting friends. I pretended not to notice when he showered immediately after returning home or when he became protective of his phone. Meanwhile, I documented everything. I took photos of receipts I found in his pockets. I noted dates and times of his absences. I created a folder on my laptop titled Garden Project that contained evidence of every lie. My daughter Sutton called weekly from California, and I never told her what was happening. I couldn't bear to break her heart over the phone. I also started consulting with a lawyer named Mr. Hargrove. He was expensive, thorough, and honest. He told me that in our state, evidence of infidelity could significantly impact divorce settlements. Then came the day Devlin asked if his friend Iris could stay with us. He presented it as a favor to someone going through hard times. Iris's apartment had flooded unexpectedly, and she needed a place for a few months. My husband actually looked me in the eyes and asked me to open our home to his lover. I should have said no. I should have confronted the lie right then. Instead, I heard myself say yes. Devlin looked surprised, then relieved, then almost guilty. He hugged me and thanked me for being so understanding. That hug felt like hugging a stranger. I realized in that moment that the man I married no longer existed. This person standing in my kitchen was someone I didn't recognize. But I had a plan forming in my mind, and saying yes was the first step. Iris moved in on a Saturday morning. She was petite, blonde, with carefully applied makeup and designer athleisure wear. She hugged me and thanked me for my generosity with tears in her eyes. Her performance was convincing, but her eyes couldn't quite hide the guilt. She knew I was the obstacle, the wife who stood between her and my husband. What she didn't know was that I'd already started transferring assets, closing joint accounts, and securing my future. The house we lived in wasn't in both our names. It was solely mine. I'd inherited it from my mother 15 years ago, and I'd been careful to keep it separate from marital property. Devlin either didn't remember this fact or had chosen to ignore it. Mr. Hargrove had confirmed that the house was legally mine alone. This information sat in my mind like a secret weapon. Living with them was psychological torture. They tried to hide their relationship, but I saw everything. The way Iris's eyes followed Devlin around the house. How they disappeared together for long periods, claiming they were running errands. The hushed conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Some nights, I heard footsteps in the hallway, someone moving between bedrooms after they thought I was asleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had become this strange nightmare. But every morning, I got up, made breakfast, and acted normal. I was pleasant to Iris. I asked about her day. I offered her food and made her feel welcome. Devlin seemed confused by my behavior. He'd expected anger or suspicion. My kindness made him uncomfortable, which gave me a small sense of satisfaction. 3 weeks after Iris moved in, I invited my daughter Sudden to visit. She arrived on a Friday evening, excited to see us. The moment she walked through the door and saw Iris, her expression changed. She pulled me aside in the kitchen and whispered questions. Who was this woman? Why was she living here? Was everything okay? I told her the truth. I showed her the messages I'd saved, the evidence I'd collected. I watched my daughter's face crumble as she realized her father had betrayed our family. She wanted to confront him immediately, but I stopped her. I explained my plan, and slowly, she understood. Sudden stayed for the weekend, watching her father and Iris with cold eyes. At dinner, she barely spoke to Devlin. He noticed but didn't understand why his daughter had suddenly become distant toward him. On Monday morning, Mr. Hargrove filed divorce papers. Devlin was served at his office by a professional process server. I wasn't there to see his reaction, but I imagined his shock. He called me 17 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. When he finally came home, his face was pale with anger and confusion. He found me in the living room, calmly reading a book. He demanded to know what was happening, why I'd filed for divorce without warning, without discussion. I looked at him steadily and said I knew everything. I knew about Iris. I knew about the affair. I knew he'd moved his lover into our house while pretending it was charity. The color drained from his face completely. Iris appeared in the doorway, looking terrified. Devlin tried to deny it, stumbling over words, but I cut him off. I told them both they had 48 hours to leave my house. Devlin started to argue, claiming he had rights, that this was his home too. That's when I pulled out the property deed. I'd had Mr. Hargrove prepare copies. I showed Devlin that the house was solely in my name, inherited from my mother, never part of our marital property. His face went through several emotions as he processed this information. Anger, disbelief, then fear. He realized he'd been living in my house for 15 years, contributing to bills but never actually owning any part of it. Iris backed away slowly, understanding that she'd moved into a situation far more complicated than she'd realized. I remained calm, my voice steady. I told them I'd already changed the locks, effective in 2 days. I'd already secured temporary housing assistance through my lawyer if they needed help finding a place. Devlin tried a different approach. He apologized, said he'd made a mistake, begged for another chance. He promised to end things with Iris immediately. He said 40 years of marriage should mean something. I listened to all of it without expression. Then I told him that 40 years should have meant something to him before he brought his affair partner into our home. I told him that respect should have meant something before he asked me to feed and house the person he was cheating with. His apologies felt empty, words said out of panic rather than genuine remorse. Iris stood silently, looking at the floor with tears streaming down her face. I almost felt sorry for her. She was younger, probably believing Devlin's promises about leaving me eventually. Now she was seeing the reality of what happens when fantasy meets consequence. That night, Sudden stayed with me. We sat together in the kitchen after Devlin and Iris retreated to separate rooms. My daughter held my hand and cried. She was angry at her father, heartbroken over our family breaking apart. I comforted her, but inside, I felt strangely calm. For months, I'd carried the weight of knowing the truth while pretending ignorance. Now everything was out in the open. The pretending was over. Sudden asked why I'd waited so long to act. I explained that I needed time to protect myself financially, to gather evidence, to make sure I wouldn't be left vulnerable. Divorce can destroy women, especially women my age. I'd seen friends lose everything because they acted emotionally instead of strategically. I refused to let that happen to me. My daughter finally understood. She hugged me tight and said she was proud of me. The next morning, I discovered Devlin had emptied our joint checking account. He'd withdrawn $15,000 overnight. I'd expected this. Mr. Hargrove had warned me that spouses often try to hide assets once divorce papers are filed. But I'd been prepared. 3 months earlier, I'd quietly opened my own account and transferred my income there. I'd also documented every deposit and withdrawal from our joint account for the past year. Devlin's sudden withdrawal would look terrible in court, especially since I had proof he'd been funding his affair with our shared money. I'd found receipts for expensive dinners, hotel rooms, jewelry, and lingerie that I'd certainly never received. All of this was already in my lawyer's hands. Devlin thought he was being clever. He had no idea I was 10 steps ahead. Mr. Hargrove called with more news. During discovery, we'd found that Devlin had taken out a credit card in both our names without telling me. He'd charged over $30,000, mostly on expenses related to Iris. Spa treatments, designer clothing, weekend trips to beach resorts. He'd been funding an entire relationship on credit that I was legally responsible for. I felt sick. 40 years of trust, destroyed. But Mr. Hargrove assured me this worked in my favor. Financial infidelity combined with adultery would strengthen my case significantly. The judge would see clearly that Devlin had been deceiving me in multiple ways. We also discovered he'd been telling people at work that we were separated, that I'd agreed to an open marriage. He'd been building a narrative that made his behavior seem acceptable. But I had texts, emails, and witnesses proving we were very much together until I filed for divorce. On the morning of their deadline to leave, I woke early. I'd hired 2 off-duty police officers to be present during the move-out, just in case things became confrontational. Mr. Hargrove had advised this precaution. When Devlin realized I was serious, when he saw the officers standing in our driveway, something in him broke. He started crying, begging, saying he'd lost his mind temporarily. He blamed stress, aging, fear of mortality. He said Iris meant nothing, that it was all a mistake. I watched this man I'd loved for 4 decades fall apart, and I felt nothing but exhaustion. His tears weren't for hurting me. They were for losing comfort, security, and the life he'd taken for granted. Iris loaded boxes into a car silently, avoiding eye contact with everyone. By noon, they were gone. The house was finally quiet. The divorce proceedings took 4 months. Devlin fought me on everything, trying to claim he deserved half the value of the house, half my retirement savings, alimony. His lawyer was aggressive, painting me as vindictive and unreasonable. But Mr. Hargrove was better. He presented evidence methodically, the messages proving the affair, the financial records showing Devlin's theft and deception, testimony from neighbors who'd witnessed Iris moving in, photos of receipts for romantic expenses. The judge, a woman in her 50s, listened to everything with an increasingly stern expression. When Devlin's lawyer tried to argue that the affair was irrelevant, that no-fault divorce meant his behavior shouldn't matter, the judge cut him off. She said that while infidelity might not impact the divorce itself, financial misconduct absolutely mattered. Devlin had been stealing marital funds to support his affair partner. The judge's ruling was clear and decisive. The house remained solely mine, as it had always been my separate property. Devlin was ordered to repay the $15,000 he'd withdrawn from our joint account. He was responsible for the entire credit card debt he'd secretly accumulated. My retirement accounts remained untouched. Devlin received only what he'd directly contributed to our shared savings, minus the money he'd spent on his affair. The judge also denied his request for alimony, stating that his own financial misconduct had destroyed any claim to my support. When the verdict was read, Devlin's face went gray. His lawyer tried to speak, but the judge was finished. She looked at Devlin directly and said that bringing an affair partner to live in the marital home showed a level of disrespect that warranted consequences. Court was adjourned. I walked out feeling lighter than I had in years. Months passed. I learned through mutual acquaintances that Devlin and Iris's relationship had fallen apart almost immediately after they moved in together. Without the excitement of secrecy, without my house and my cooking and my income supporting them, reality hit hard. Iris apparently realized that Devlin was just a man in his 60s with significant debt and no property. Devlin realized that Iris had been attracted to the fantasy of an established older man, not the reality of starting over with nothing. They separated within 3 months. Devlin moved into a small apartment alone. I heard he looked older now, tired. Several people asked if I felt sorry for him. I didn't. I felt sorry for the woman I'd been, who'd given 40 years to someone who'd thrown it away so carelessly. But I didn't feel sorry for him. I began rebuilding my life with intention. I redecorated the house, removing every trace of Devlin's presence. I painted walls in colors he'd never liked. I bought furniture that was mine alone. Sudden visited more often, and we grew closer than we'd ever been. She brought her partner to meet me, and we had long dinners filled with laughter. I joined a book club, started taking pottery classes, and volunteered at a local women's shelter. Working with women escaping domestic situations gave me perspective. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, these were tools used to control and diminish women. I'd experienced a milder version, but it was still abuse. I shared my story carefully, and several women told me I'd inspired them to take action in their own situations. That feedback meant more than anything else. My pain had purpose now. A year after the divorce finalized, I ran into Devlin at a grocery store. He looked startled, then ashamed. He mumbled a greeting and tried to walk past, but something made me stop him. I asked how he was doing. He said he was managing, working, trying to pay off debt. He looked at me with genuine regret and said he was sorry, that he'd destroyed the best thing in his life. I nodded, accepting his apology not for him, but for myself. I told him I hoped he'd learned something, that he'd treat people better in the future. Then I walked away. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel satisfaction at his struggles. I felt free. The weight of betrayal, of humiliation, of pretending, it was all gone. I was 63 years old, and my life was finally my own. I'm 64 now, and my house is filled with peace. Sudden calls me her hero, though I don't feel heroic. I just refused to let someone else's choices destroy me. I protected myself when no one else would. That's not heroism, that's survival. But if my story helps even one woman understand that she has options, that she doesn't have to accept disrespect, then sharing it was worth it. To anyone reading this who's living with betrayal, who's pretending everything is fine while dying inside, please know this. You are stronger than you think. You deserve respect. You deserve honesty. And you absolutely deserve better than someone who would bring their affair partner into your home. Don't act from anger. Act from strategy. Protect yourself first, then walk away with your head high. Your real life is waiting on the other side of that door. If this story made you think differently about protecting yourself in difficult situations, please subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Your engagement helps others find this message. Sometimes the quietest response is the most powerful one. Thank you for listening. Financial infidelity is real abuse. Document everything. Protect your assets. Consult a lawyer before confronting a cheating spouse. Knowledge is power, and preparation is protection. Before you go, I need to know something. What hit you the hardest? The betrayal? The moment everything fell apart? The twist you never saw coming? Drop it in the comments right now. And tell me what you want to see next. Medical fraud? Family secrets? Financial crimes? Hidden identities? Your ideas become our next stories. If this story kept you glued to the screen, hit that like button. If you want more shocking true stories that expose the truth, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. Thanks for letting me share this story with you. The next one drops soon, and it's going to shake you even harder. See you there.